seeing is believing, or hearing is believing. I think, like many other people in this country, I didn't know much.
Kate wasn't looking for a scandal. She was looking through royal archives. But what she found would rewrite Charlotte's future and shake the crown to its core. It began as nothing more than protocol, a quiet afternoon dedicated to reviewing ceremonial documentation, a routine process every royal spouse endures behind palace walls. For Kate, it was a chance to better understand the vaults and the meticulously catalogued world of royal heirlooms passed down for generations. These weren't simply objects, they were history preserved in velvet and glass. She turned each page with curiosity and reverence, until her fingers stopped on a folder that should have never existed. It wasn't thick, but the weight of it made the air shift. Inside, details of inheritance protocols appeared. Names, dates, classifications. Nothing unusual at first glance. But then, like a splinter beneath the skin, something felt wrong. A familiar tiara no longer bore Charlotte's name. An emerald necklace, once promised by William himself, was now reassigned. Another entry referred to L. Parker B., a name Kate had never seen in official records. As she read deeper, her heartbeat sharpened. Diana's legacy, once carefully mapped to reach her granddaughter, was quietly rerouted. Not to another member of the firm, but to Camilla's granddaughter, Lola. There were no formal announcements, no ceremony, no reason, just a list of reassigned heirlooms, redirected through whispers and signatures, centuries of tradition, shredded in silence. Kate's eyes scanned for clerical notes, royal justifications, anything. What she found instead were dates that didn't match memory, inheritance notes missing, and phrases crossed out with careful, strategic intent. It wasn't an oversight, it was a redirect, a theft not of gold or jewels, but of meaning. Each page twisted the knife deeper. Diana's tiaras, brooches, and necklaces weren't just missing, they were being absorbed into another line. A line with no royal titles, no rightful claim, and no connection to the woman who changed the monarchy forever. It was more than betrayal. It was sabotage cloaked in protocol. And Charlotte, the girl whose name carried Diana's spirit and Queen Elizabeth's strength, was being written out of the very story she was born to inherit. Kate had never been one to panic. Her strength wasn't loud, but steady. And as she closed the folder, something inside her shifted. She had faced criticism, pressure, and global scrutiny before, but this was different. This was personal. The folder wasn't just a discovery, it was a declaration. A message that tradition could be tampered with, that promises could be rewritten in shadows. Kate closed the folder, but she opened a door to something far more dangerous, something that couldn't be ignored. Charlotte wasn't just born into royalty, she was born into a name that demanded she carry the monarchy's most sacred legacy. From the very moment her birth was announced, the world knew this child was no ordinary princess. Charlotte Elizabeth Diana, three names that echo with reverence, power, and heartbreak. A tribute to the unshakable grace of Queen Elizabeth II and the unbreakable spirit of Princess Diana. Her name was a silent contract written in duty and remembrance. No royal child in recent memory had ever been so perfectly positioned to embody the past while symbolizing the future. She wasn't just William and Kate's daughter, she was a living heirloom, a soul entwined with memory, born under the weight of promise. Third in line to the throne, Charlotte made history before she could walk. As the first princess in generations granted equal succession rights, she broke from centuries of patriarchal precedents, signaling a new monarchy forged in balance and respect. She wasn't a spare, she was an heir. And with that position came more than pageantry. It came with expectation. She would grow up under a spotlight, yes, but also under a microscope. Her every move would be compared, measured, and echoed in generations to come. That responsibility doesn't begin with a crown, it begins with a cradle. Even her christening was steeped in meaning. Held at St. Mary Magdalene Church in Sandringham, the very same church where Diana herself had been baptized, the moment was a deliberate nod to history. It wasn't just tradition, it was a strategy, a signal that Charlotte's lineage wasn't just royal, it was sacred. Every detail, every setting, every name in her life was chosen to echo the past and foreshadow the future. She wasn't being raised to carry a title, she was being raised to carry a legacy. Publicly, her life was curated with poised photographs on palace steps, waves at balcony appearances, choreographed yet endearing. But behind palace doors, the real preparation began. This wasn't about training in etiquette or rehearsing curtsies. This was about inheritance not only of land or title, but of identity. Diana's most cherished heirlooms, the jewels that once graced her during moments of triumph and turbulence, had been quietly earmarked for Charlotte, not as vanity, but as symbols. A sapphire tiara, worn in the face of political storms. A brooch, gifted during diplomatic breakthroughs. An emerald necklace that carried the whispers of love and rebellion. Every piece matched with Charlotte not just by style, but by story. These weren't decorations, they were messages. Glittering promises that her grandmother's legacy would not be confined to memory. Through Charlotte, Diana would live again. That the monarchy, often criticized for coldness, could still be moved by emotion, by lineage, by love. It was never spoken aloud, but it didn't need to be. The message was clear. Charlotte would not just wear Diana's jewels, she would wear her resilience, her grace, her courage. But while Charlotte's path was paved in memory and meaning, someone else had quietly started clearing that road. While the world smiled at Queen Camilla's coronation, behind the scenes she was rewriting history with a pen and a plan. The coronation of King Charles III was painted as a moment of unity, tradition, and reconciliation. Camilla stood beside him, robed in elegance, her transformation from the most controversial woman in the monarchy to queen consort seemingly complete. It was a victory crafted over decades, carefully built through polished appearances, softened narratives, and relentless image management. But behind the applause and the orchestrated smiles, something far more calculated was happening. Camilla wasn't just ascending beside the crown, she was quietly reaching into its future and rearranging it. Power, once held at a ceremonial distance, now rested within her grasp. And she didn't waste time. With her new title came unprecedented access to the royal vaults, archives, and inheritance protocols. No announcement, no flashing lights, just a slow, precise reshuffling of history. Royal aides, long trained to follow orders without question, began noticing subtle changes that didn't make headlines but should have. A tiara once designated as a legacy item for Charlotte was suddenly relabeled as general use. A pair of sapphire earrings disappeared from Charlotte's line and appeared under another branch, seemingly by coincidence. But coincidences, in the palace, are rarely accidental. Buried in administrative silence, Camilla's moves were hidden beneath layers of classification, policy adjustments, and royal discretion. And then came the name Lola Parker Bowles, Camilla's granddaughter, a sweet, unassuming child by all public accounts. But in the internal records, she was now linked to heirlooms that had never belonged to her bloodline. Priceless pieces once reserved for Diana's lineage are now redirected without justification. No official title, no royal responsibilities, no position in the succession. Yet, Charlotte's inheritance was being rewritten in real time to benefit someone with no rightful claim. And still, the palace remained silent. A culture of discretion protected Camilla's maneuvers from public scrutiny. Staff whispered behind closed doors. Some remembered how Queen Elizabeth had fiercely guarded the tradition of passing heirlooms by blood, by legacy, by duty. But now, under the reign of Charles and Camilla, those lines were blurring. The foundation was shifting. What was once sacred was now strategic. And while Camilla played the part of ceremonial support, her pen had already carved out a different future, one where Diana's legacy no longer led to Charlotte, but to Lola. It was audacious, it was quiet, and it was working until someone noticed. Not just someone watching, someone who had everything to lose. A mother, a future queen, a woman who understood that this wasn't just about jewelry, this was about identity, about rewriting the very script of who inherits legacy and who gets erased. Because Camilla may have thought the silence would shield her, but she didn't count on Kate. But where whispers ended, Kate's quiet fury began, and she didn't need titles to fight back. She didn't raise her voice, but every step Kate took echoed louder than thunder in royal halls. In the quiet corridors of the palace, where whispers often carried more weight than speeches, Kate began a calculated journey. This was no frantic outburst fueled by anger or desperation. It was a deliberate, controlled quest for truth. She moved discreetly, holding private meetings with palace historians, guardians of memory, and trusted aides who had once stood close to Diana. These conversations were hushed but charged, each word a puzzle piece in a growing mosaic of deception. With patience that belied the fire beneath, Kate sifted through decades of carefully preserved records, looking beyond the official gloss to what lay beneath. She compared gift designations, inheritance tags, and vault inventories, meticulously matching each item once promised to her daughter. The Spencer tiara, a glittering symbol worn by Diana on her wedding day, was no longer listed under Charlotte's name. The emerald necklace, a token of love and legacy from Diana's landmark visit to Pakistan, had vanished from the roster. The iconic lover's knot tiara, a favorite of the late princess, had quietly slipped from the inheritance ledger. Each absence was a silent scream, an erasure cloaked in bureaucracy. Emails surfaced internal memos, hinting at decisions made without consultation. Logs of movements within the royal vaults recorded under unfamiliar names. Signatures, the invisible handprints of those who authorized these changes, quietly gathered as evidence. Kate knew the value of restraint. She never confronted Camilla directly. That battle would come later. For now, she was weaving a web of undeniable proof, one that would leave no room for excuses or denial. This was no mere dispute over jewels. It was a war over history itself, over who controlled the narrative of legacy and who could claim the crown of memory. With every discovery, Kate's resolve deepened. She was not just protecting a collection of precious stones, she was safeguarding a lineage, a promise made to a little girl who deserved to carry her grandmother's light. Kate wasn't just tracking jewelry, she was tracking betrayal, and what she uncovered would soon change everything. Each jewel was a memory. Each one now missing was a message. Diana's legacy was being erased. The Spencer tiara was more than a piece of royal finery. It was a symbol etched into history. Crowned upon Diana's head as she walked down the aisle, it represented a union watched by millions, a moment of hope and fairy tale glamour. For years, that tiara rested in Charlotte's vault, preserved not just for its sparkle, but for its story, a tangible link connecting granddaughter to grandmother. Yet, without fanfare or explanation, it was reclassified. No longer reserved for Charlotte's future, it was moved into a pool labeled general use, open for any member of the royal family to wear. The message was clear. The promise once made was quietly broken. The lover's knot tiara, perhaps even more iconic, had graced Diana's head at countless state events, becoming a global emblem of strength, beauty, and heartbreak. Photographs immortalized it, every twist of diamonds telling tales of diplomacy and resilience. This tiara, too, was pulled from its place of honor. Once earmarked solely for Charlotte, it was now catalogued as available to Camilla's immediate circle. No longer a legacy, but a commodity. Something to be claimed by those who held power rather than blood. The emerald necklace, a breathtaking piece Diana wore during her 1990s state visit to Pakistan, was a particularly personal token. William had made a quiet vow that one day Charlotte would wear this necklace, a symbol not only of royal heritage, but of the love and memory that bound them across generations. But that promise, like the others, vanished. The necklace disappeared from Charlotte's inheritance list, as if erased by an unseen hand. Rumors began to swirl within palace corridors. Camilla, wielding her discretionary authority as queen consort, had taken control of unused heirlooms and reassigned them as she saw fit. Yet these weren't mere clerical adjustments. Each reassignment carried weight far beyond paperwork. They felt personal, deliberate moves meant to dilute Diana's presence in the future of the monarchy, to shift legacy away from her bloodline. Patterns emerged like shadows lengthening over palace walls. Diana's jewels were not simply relocated, they were being redistributed, their meaning fading with every change. Behind the quiet veneer of protocol and ceremony, a deeper battle for heritage was unfolding. A battle fought not with swords or words but with signatures and silence. But no amount of quiet manipulation could prepare Camilla for what was coming next the moment Kate finally spoke. There were no cameras, no audience, just Kate, Camilla, and the truth. In the hushed corridors of Kensington Palace, a meeting unlike any other was quietly set into motion. No public spectacle, no flashing bulbs, just two women locked in a silent battlefield of wills. Kate arrived carrying more than just a folder. She carried months of relentless investigation, meticulously gathered evidence, and a determination that could not be swayed by royal protocol or political games. Inside that slim file lay cross-referenced records, emails, official signatures, all threads woven together to expose a truth Camilla could no longer ignore. Camilla entered with a poised smile, her composure unshaken, but beneath it flickered the faintest shadow of uncertainty. As Kate laid out the pages, each sheet unfolded the story of betrayal, inheritance, documents altered, heirlooms reassigned, promises broken. At first, Camilla denied everything, her voice steady but defensive. She blamed aides, clerical errors, misunderstandings born of bureaucracy. Yet, with every page Kate presented, the room grew heavier, the excuses thinner. There was no room left for doubt. Kate did not shout or plead. She did not call for justice with fiery words or dramatic accusations. Instead, she was the embodiment of calm resolve, unwavering, precise, and resolute. Her voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of a line crossed, a boundary breached. This was no petty dispute. It was an assault on legacy, on memory, on the future of a young girl destined to carry a crown far heavier than jewels. Her message cut through the silence like a blade. The past could not be rewritten, the inheritance could not be stolen, and the legacy of Diana must be preserved. Kate demanded not vengeance, but respect. Not revenge, but restoration. The path to healing began with truth, and truth was the only thing that mattered in that room. And while Camilla retreated behind excuses, Kate emerged with something far more powerful than words. She didn't speak a word, but the necklace around her neck said everything. The room fell into a hushed awe as Kate entered the grand hall of St. James's Palace for the evening charity event. All eyes were drawn not just to her calm, graceful poise, but to the dazzling emerald necklace resting like a crown jewel at the base of her throat. This was no ordinary accessory. It was the very necklace Diana had worn during her landmark 1990s visit to Pakistan, a piece heavy with history, heartache, and hope. For decades, this emerald necklace had been a symbol of Diana's enduring legacy, a reminder of her bold spirit and the bridge she built between the past and the future. Now, in an act so quietly defiant, Kate had reclaimed it. She wore it not to dazzle or to boast, but to send a message to the world. Diana's legacy was alive, unbroken, and fiercely protected. Within moments, the media buzz erupted. Photographs of Kate with that iconic necklace flashed across screens globally. Commentators called it "Justice Wrapped in Emeralds," a silent but thunderous proclamation that the fight for heritage had been won, at least for now. Social media exploded. The hashtag number Justice for Charlotte trended within hours, fueled by a wave of admiration and emotional resonance that swept through royal watchers, Diana's admirers, and mothers everywhere who understood the fierce protectiveness behind the gesture. Historians weighed in, calling the moment a seismic shift in royal symbolism. This was no mere fashion statement, but a carefully calculated reclaiming of power, history, and identity. Kate had not only restored a jewel to its rightful place, she had restored a narrative, a truth too long muted by whispered politics and quiet betrayals. To wear that necklace was to wear memory itself, a fierce shield forged from grief, love, and unyielding resolve. Public perception shifted overnight. Kate evolved from the polished, ever-dutiful Duchess into a cultural icon, a guardian of legacy, and a woman willing to fight silent battles to protect what mattered most. She became the emblem of dignity under pressure, strength behind subtlety, and courage beneath grace. Across news outlets and editorials, voices praised her restraint, yet undeniable power, painting her as the woman who stood unwavering between the past's ghosts and the future's promise. Meanwhile, Camilla found herself cast in a darker light. The woman once cautiously accepted as queen consort now faced the harsh glare of public scrutiny. To many, she was the embodiment of ambition gone unchecked, a figure whose quiet maneuvers had ignited a storm that her polished veneer could no longer contain. The necklace became a symbol not just of what was regained, but of what was nearly lost to greed and manipulation. But while the world cheered and the public crowned Kate the victor of this emotional war, behind palace walls, a more dangerous storm began to gather that threatened to shake the very foundations of the monarchy and the fragile balance of power within. The fight for legacy was far from over. The necklace won the people, but it fractured the palace. Behind the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, the emerald necklace was more than a jewel. It had become a symbol of a shifting monarchy, a catalyst that tore through the delicate fabric of royal unity. King Charles, a man steeped in decades of tradition and political maneuvering, now found himself caught in a quiet storm, far fiercer than any public scandal. The conflict was no longer about diplomacy or duty. It was a personal battle between his wife, Camilla, the queen consort, whose ambitions had unsettled the palace, and Kate, the future queen who had seized the public's heart and the mantle of legitimacy. Charles wrestled with the weight of his loyalties. He had stood by Camilla through years of criticism, scandal, and relentless scrutiny. But the tides were turning. The public adored Kate. Her silent strength and fierce defensive legacy had earned her a stature that no title alone could confer. For the first time, Charles glimpsed a new power dynamic, one not dictated by crown or ceremony but by trust and principle. His wife's presence, once a stabilizing force, now seemed fragile, as if slipping from his grasp. Within the palace, senior aides of the unseen architects of royal continuity began to sense the change. Allegiances subtly shifted, loyalties quietly realigned. Conversations once hushed now carried a different tone, favoring the woman who stood as the guardian of tradition and integrity. Kate's name grew heavier in whispers, a name tied not just to bloodline but to the survival of the monarchy's soul. She became the axis around which the fragile balance of power began to pivot. Camilla, sensing the winds of change, withdrew from public duties. Her appearances grew fewer, her speeches shorter, her smile less assured. Behind closed doors, those closest to her spoke of sleepless nights and growing isolation. The ambition that had propelled her rise now felt like a weight pressing down, tightening with every glance cast in Kate's direction. The palace, once her stage, was becoming a place of uncertainty and retreat. Meanwhile, Kate's rise was not marked by grand declarations or public showdowns. It was quiet, relentless, and undeniable. She embodied the principles the monarchy desperately needed: steadfastness in crisis, reverence for legacy, and an unspoken vow to protect what history demanded. To many within the royal circle, she had become the de facto guardian of tradition, the unyielding force, ensuring that promises made to the past were honored in the present. This internal reshuffle did not explode in public drama. Instead, it unfolded in whispered meetings, exchanged glances, and strategic choices made behind palace doors. The monarchy was changing not through revolution, but through subtle shifts in power, trust, and influence. And at the very heart of this quiet upheaval stood a girl too young to grasp the magnitude of what had just been reclaimed for her. A girl destined to inherit not only jewels, but the weight of history itself. And in the heart of this royal reshuffle stood a girl too young to know her destiny had just been reclaimed. Charlotte may not yet understand the battle, but she will forever carry the victory. Her world is carefully crafted by those who love her most, her parents, William and Kate, shielding her from the relentless gaze of history while preparing her for the weight it demands. In a childhood cocoon of laughter, bedtime stories, and fleeting innocence, Charlotte exists both as a normal girl and a future monarch, a delicate balance between freedom and destiny. Her name, Charlotte Elizabeth Diana, is more than a label. It is a living testament to generations of strength, duty, and defiance woven into her very being. Each syllable is a whispered promise of legacy and resilience, carrying the weight of two women who shaped the monarchy's soul. But Kate's fight was never about jewels or ceremonial pomp. It was a battle for identity, memory, and belonging. A struggle to ensure that Charlotte's place in history would be anchored not just by blood, but by truth. By preserving heirlooms, Kate preserved more than precious stones. She safeguarded the essence of who Charlotte is meant to become. It was a silent rebellion against erasure, a mother's vow that her daughter would inherit the spirit and strength of a grandmother she never met. Charlotte's path will not be easy. The pressures of expectation will press against her like the weight of the crown itself. Yet, thanks to her mother's unwavering resolve, she will grow rooted in authenticity, grounded by a legacy reclaimed from shadows and silences. Kate's strength is the quiet foundation beneath Charlotte's feet, a shield forged in patience, strategy, and love. This legacy is a bridge connecting past to future, pain to promise, memory to meaning. It is guarded not by power or privilege, but by love, fierce and unyielding. Because in the royal family, some legacies are too sacred to steal, and Kate Middleton made sure of that. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.